Hi, I'm Ashley Adamson, and today we're going to talk about the subtle effects after surgery of your effects of how you see your body. So, the reason why I want to talk about the subtle effects is because these are the things that you may not notice at first and continuously happen until you start to recognize that they're happening. And now that it's been about 6 or 7 weeks since I've had breast surgery, boobies, and face surgery, face, I wanted to talk to you about that. So, first of all, your mileage may vary with surgery. And what I mean by that is not just the results you get, but the feeling, the experience of that. You know, I thought I was going to get this big emotional change in my surgery. Like, oh my God, like, wow. But it wasn't like that at all, honestly. And a part of that is probably because I haven't seen the full effects yet. It's still going to take 3 months for the swelling to go down so that I see 80% of my face, and also my breasts haven't fully kind of settled in yet. But I'm already starting to see these things. And there's kind of two main parts that I want to share with you today to give you insight in your own transition, which is the first part is the self-perception changes. And the second part is sort of the kind of we'll get to that, and we'll kind of figure out what to call it, what it is. So the first part is sort of the self-perception changes. That relationship with the mirror. We all have one, right? And how would you describe your relationship with the mirror? I feel like as a trans person, our relationship is super complicated because we've seen this old version of the self, and now we know that there's a new version of the self that we probably even saw in the mirror at some point. But she or he or they are not always there in the way that we want to see them. And that can cause a struggle in itself. There's plenty of things to judge ourselves for and plenty of ways to size up or size down our own validity in our bodies and our own attractiveness of how we see ourselves. And there's nothing better to remind you of how you look than to look in the mirror, especially because we think that this is representative of reality, which I should probably note is not. Our own self-perception is based mostly off of how we see things in our brain, and we teach and condition our brain to think in certain ways and to perceive things larger or smaller or anything more specifically every time we train our brain to do that, which is simply just by focusing on something. For example, some people may focus on their nose a lot more than most people, and by doing this, they can get hyper-focused on these little details about their nose until their nose becomes a problem, and then they need a nose job, and then maybe they need another nose job, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. For me personally, I focused a lot on this birthmark I have up here, which I don't even know if is coming through on this camera, and I also have these bumps on my skin. And these things I actually focus on a lot. And it makes me feel gross, makes me feel ugly. And I'm working through that, of course, self-love and self-acceptance. But pre-surgery, the things that I was focusing on was my lip. My lip was super gross looking to me. And I just I honed in on that, super focused on it. And it was this really big problem to me. People would tell me, oh yeah, I love your lips. Your lips look great. They're so gorgeous. They're nice and big, blah, blah, blah. But all I felt was super ugly about it. And that was the main focus of the discussion with Dr. Kirjampa, which was can you make my lips more feminine? Can you lift them in a way that's going to make it look better? Because I hate my lips. And I've talked about this a little bit about being approached by men and kind of had an emotional moment there. But yeah, that's kind of the main thing that I focused on. And now, post-surgery, I don't focus on it as much. It's not where it's going to eventually be. It's more swollen than it will be. But just getting it lifted has removed that conversation in the mirror, that dialogue. And I think that's really what surgery has done for me and affecting me subtly, is not changing the conversation in the mirror from, oh my God, like you're ugly, or like I don't accept you. But it became, I thought that after surgery, I was going to be like, oh my God, you're beautiful, you're gorgeous, you look so good. No, that's not what happened. What happened is it moved the bar from negativity to minor, my spectrum was negativity to slight positivity. And now my spectrum is closer to indifference to a higher end of positivity. I'm starting to notice that I can be more attractive now. And that's having me think about how I can be more attractive, which I think is the other interesting thing. And that's the next point I wanted to talk about, which is when you kind of like get yourself to a certain stage, you look naturally. And I think this is a human aspect. Like, do you ever have this experience where you get to some stage and then you want to look towards the next stage? For me, like with surgery, it's like, okay, well, what is the next stage? Now that I have the ability to not hide my forehead, do I not hide my forehead? How do I change my hair? And what do I look like with makeup on, which I haven't put on makeup yet. But I got this body now with these boobs and I feel a little bit more banging. And, I kind of want to push that a little bit. So I bought some clothes that kind of bring out my breasts. And that's kind of like this natural progression there. Now that I've up-leveled, I want more. And I think early in my transition, it was like, I don't need FFS. I don't want breast surgery. But as time goes on, you start to look a little further and you go, you know what? If I can have a better face, I'll go for it. If I can have a better body, I realize these dresses I can't wear without having breasts because it just doesn't look good on my body. So I actually want to have those things. And so wherever you are in your transition, you start to kind of, like, for me to forecast your transition, you're going to naturally start to look to greener fields in ways that you can expand and grow. And I know the saying can be, well, just accept yourself. And you probably hear this a lot if you're trans. Just accept yourself. Just love yourself. Yes, that's a valid thing to do. And I'm going to make another video about self-love. And I highly encourage self-love and accepting all of yourself. But there's an undeniable truth to being trans where you also don't want to be where you started from. Otherwise, there's no transition, right? Maybe of the mind, right? But if you don't take hormones or you don't change your pronouns or you change your dress or anything, then you're not trying to progress to something else. And this is a larger discussion about society and how it treats you and how you also need to step into that because you're going to be existing in a world where you want to be addressed and treated in the right way societally by your gender. Like dressing as a woman changes the way people see me and treat me and talk to me. Like I want that. You look towards other fields. And so for me, post-surgery, I'm looking towards other fields. And this is kind of where there's this fuzzy line with where does the transition end? We talked a little bit about this in the Chloe Connection video the other day, which I'll also have to link. It's on her page. Is like, I'm looking towards, okay, so now I have this face and now I have these boobs. So I've got some curves. But what about my hips? Because my shoulders are big and I feel a little imbalanced. What do I do about my hips? Typical trans woman problem. Big shoulders, small hips, right? Big ribs. These things still get to me. And when I look in the mirror, I don't look at the parts that I've had surgery on. I look at the parts that haven't had surgery. So I'm thinking to myself, do I want hip implants? What would I do about removing a rib or changing a shoulder or like cutting that? These are all of the things that naturally happen if you're on a path of progressing down your transition to look onto greener fields. But there's this obsession that can come with it. And I think we've all heard of those narratives that people tell us, because every time I tell someone that I'm getting surgery, people are like, well, don't be one of those forever trans people that are taking a million different surgeries and keep on going. I'm like, bitch, like you don't even know what the fuck that's all about. I don't say that. And I just want to embody my emotions right there. That's how frustrated I am with that statement. But there are people that do endlessly plastic surgery, the person that does like 5 nose jobs or what have you. There's got to be an end. And this sense of wanting to progress will keep you going, but you also have to have some principles where you draw the line. I don't think I'm going to go back for FFS to redo anything that's been done. If I were to change one thing, maybe it'd be something that I haven't changed already. But I'm kind of like, breasts, face, now I'm working down. And it has me thinking about vaginoplasty and hip implants and these other options. So where do I land on that? I think it's too soon to tell. I'm going to let myself wait. I'm going to push it out and not try to move too fast. I think like the most powerful thing we have in our transition is actually time. And I know that may sound kind of dumb or perhaps not exciting because all of us want to transition through our transition faster, right? Like if you could just flick a switch and just get to the other side of where you want to be, wouldn't you just do that? I would. And that's great, but the process of a transition in your mind your brain just doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like a switch. If it did, then it could switch into too many different things so fast, you would get super confused, you'd lose yourself. Our identity and our sense of our ego, our I, helps ground us in our bodies and ground us in the situation of our lives and gives us context for making decisions and taking care of ourselves. And you can't just like switch that like black and white all of a sudden. It can feel like that from time to time. I remember early in my transition when I put on clothes and I embodied being a woman, it did really feel like a switch because a different person, a different version of myself would come out. But over time, it was really just a practice of flipping this switch and then processing it and then integrating it into the real me. So I would become a persona, experience things in my dress and my wig and all of that, and then absorb those and integrate them into the me that is the center, the focal point of me. And that gradual shift of that masculine me to that feminine me was a multi-year process. And that's what a transition really is this time of moving between these different states and helping the mind cope and express and rediscover parts of you on a mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual level. Man, we've gone off the tracks. I don't know where we are now. But I'm going to wrap it up and say that, I want you to think about this. Where are you looking onto greener fields? Where can you pull out principles in your own beliefs of where you want to draw the line? And how are you seeing yourself in the mirror? How are you treating yourself? How are you telling the story of your transition to yourself? How is that affecting you now? And how's that going to affect your decisions in the future? You want to be conscious of the story you tell and the narrative you create around your transgenderness, because it can be a tool to empower you, or it can be a tool to disempower you. And I find it odd to call it a tool because who would want to build that tool to disempower you? A part of yourself may use that against you, whether that's telling the narrative of that you'll never be accepted, or that you're never going to find the one for you, or that you're just too ugly, or that you don't look good enough. Like, these are the stories that I would tell to myself. I'll never find the one because I'm trans and they'll never accept me, or something like that. Sounds stupid to say, but if you don't examine these unexamined beliefs, these things you may not look at or not pay attention to, they grow and they sink roots in and they start to build stories that you start to live out. The narrative is one of the most powerful mechanisms through which we encode information. It's a fundamental human thing that we do. And you want to be aware of the way that you are encoding your perception of the world and acting and living that out in your own story. Yeah, it's pretty heavy, pretty deep, right? So I want you to think about this because it's good for you, and it's good for me to think about these things too as I process with you as we speak. So I want to give you a hug. I want to send you love. And wherever you are, you're not alone. It may feel like you're alone, but you're not. I'm here. We're talking about some of these things. I'm sure you've related to some of those. That's evidence that you're not alone. And there's other people out there too. Sending you love. I'll see you in another episode soon. Bye.